The Last Voyage of the Demeter. A movie that just came out yesterday. I saw it last night. It tells a story based off of a chapter out of the Dracula, the classic book Dracula, about a ship, the Demeter, taking private cargo from one side to the other side of the ocean without the captain actually knowing what's in these cargoes and who's ordering them to take it. Obviously, throughout the movie, this is a movie about Dracula himself, the classic horror monster, and I think it does a really good job. Obviously, it's based off of the book. It tells a really good story. It's based off of one chapter out of this book, so there's a lot more to this story that could be held in the future for future movies, which they do kind of set it up pretty well. Obviously, Dracula himself, the story kind of takes place on this ship, and the only thing he really has to feed on are the crew members of the Demeter. On to the pros for me. The cast itself, or the crew of the Demeter, I think do a really good job of playing this kind of pirate type of crew in a way where these characters don't really have a huge story arc or a really main plot to the actual story of Dracula. They don't really change anything. They kind of serve as a kind of all-you-can-eat buffet for Dracula, which I think is still really cool to kind of see. Characters don't always need a huge story arc and development and stuff like that. It can be just sometimes a fun kind of gory movie, and for Dracula to feed on again. And I think they still do really well of their acting capabilities, of acting scared when they have to, acting in a panic, playing the role of this crew of the Demeter. And I still think they do that really well because the actors that they got are, really good established actors, some of them. And you still kind of care for them, but at the same time, you're kind of also waiting to see which one is going to be slaughtered next, which is also fun to see on this movie here. Dracula itself, I think it's a really cool model. We'll get a little bit more about Dracula itself in the cons, but I think overall in the positives, I think they did a really good job with the overall model, kind of the suspense of when he shows up, kind of into the shadows, the way that he kind of progresses in terms of his powers, the more and more he feeds, because it seems like he's been dormant for a little while, in this kind of box that they're taking in the Demeter, which is how he actually comes on board, because of these crates that they're taking that they don't know who issued the shipment or anything like that. The visuals are pretty cool as well. Obviously the whole story takes place pretty much on the Demeter, on this boat. So you're in the middle of the ocean the entire time. It's always dark, rainy. It makes you feel like you are kind of secluded. And for these characters that are stuck on here with these beasts, they really have nowhere to go. They can't just jump offshore or jump off ship and swim to shore, because they're miles and miles and miles away now. So they're pretty much kind of having to figure out how to stop Dracula. And it's pretty cool because it keeps you in that condensed space where you really have no escape. Where a lot of horror movies, you kind of feel like, the classic trope, like just run out the front door and go find somebody. You really can't do that here. You can't just leave the ship and go find somebody, because there really is no one to find at this moment. Now on to the cons for me. Like I said, I think the way they did Dracula was very well, but there's times here and there where I felt like you could definitely tell the CGI a little too much, when the lightning will flash and you'll see his full body. And sure, he was kind of mainly in the bat form in a way, so his skin did look a little bit more slimy, but I think that could also make the CGI pop out a lot more. But overall, I think the overall design of Dracula was done really well. Not too many negatives here for me, not too many cons on the movie. I think it did a really good job. I really enjoyed myself. The pacing could be slow at times, but overall I think it did really good on the pacing. The story, of course, it's a classic story of Dracula, so there was a lot of good gore factors. There are some scenes in here that might, trigger some people. I know the person I went with, they didn't really like one of these scenes. It didn't really sit too well with them. But if you're okay with gore, if you're okay with certain scenes that might not make everybody totally happy, and I'm not talking about the story itself that might trigger you. It's just a certain character within the movie, something happens to him, and it can be hard for some people to see that. there were some parts where I did definitely feel kind of tense. It wasn't necessarily like fear or horror, but there's things that made me feel uncomfortable, which is actually, I think, is really good for this movie, where you have this classic Dracula character that, you know, everybody knows already. It's not really like a horror, like jump scare, make you feel terrified about where you are in a dark room. It's definitely more kind of just like that suspense, making you feel tense. And I think they did a really good job without having to do that with a lot of jump scares. It was just a lot of more suspense. You know, being able to see Dracula just a little bit in the dark, or when the lightning flashes, he's behind the character, and it kind of just makes you, again, a little bit tense in your seat, which is, I think, is a better way to do it than having these jump scares just out of nowhere. You know, so I don't really appreciate cheap jump scares like that. So I definitely think they did a really good job on bringing the more horror or thriller side of it versus kind of like a jump scare type of scary movie in a way. So I think that was really good. So overall, I think you should definitely check out The Last Voyage of the Demeter in theaters. I think it's a really good job of portraying Dracula, this, you know, one chapter out of the Dracula classic book. And again, they definitely led to some hints of a future movie, which I'm actually really excited about. I think they ended the movie really well, and it was definitely a satisfying ending for me, even though you know that there's going to be more. Or maybe there isn't going to be more, but for the most part, it looks like there will be another movie after this one, which is I'm kind of excited about. Again, they didn't really talk too much about this movie. You know, it kind of came out of nowhere. I didn't really know this movie was coming out until maybe about a week ago, which is totally fine. I think it's one of the more slept on horror movies of the year, but I think it's going to do really well. So I hope a lot of people go out and see it. You, of course, always, like I said, support directors, support screenwriters, support actors. It's always good to go to the movie and have that movie theater experience. So overall, I would give Dracula about a 7.5 out of 10, maybe an 8, maybe if I see it again. But overall, those are my thoughts on it. I definitely give it a positive review. Definitely go check it out. And when it comes out on any streaming service or on physical media, I would definitely suggest buying it or streaming it on wherever you like streaming your movies. So again, thank you guys for watching. This is a review on the Last Voyage of Demeter. This is Leo's Nerd Talk, and I'll see you guys on the next review. Thank you.